Hey guys, Chris here, and I'm a Ukrainian Canadian. Today's November 18th, 2022, and let's get over the news happening in Ukraine, shall we? So, first of all, the Russians apparently are transferring their troops from Kherson to the direction of Luhansk, is saying the General Staff of Ukraine, meaning that the Russians are perhaps anticipating the Ukrainians to continue striking in Luhansk, and I believe that is the case. So now that Kherson, the right bank of Kherson, has been taken and liberated by the Ukrainians, I think it's going to take some time for the Ukrainians to strike and do phase two to take back the entirety of the left bank of Kherson. So now the focus of the Ukrainian forces is definitely going to be in Luhansk and Donbass. And the goal is to essentially start pushing from the north here towards Donetsk and essentially stop the Russian pushes that they're trying to do in Bakhmut and Donetsk city and the south of Donetsk as well, that they're trying to push through Pavlivka and Vuhledar. As you can see here, the Russians are also trying to heavily push into Vuhledar here to push north and essentially create a pocket and surround the Ukrainian forces from behind. So the Ukrainians are going all in into Luhansk, and thus why the Russians are transferring some of their best troops that were located in Kherson on this front. Now, when we're looking at the map as well, the Ukrainians right now are fighting in the forests of Kreminna, essentially trying to take this town to cut off the supplies heading to Severodonetsk, as you see here in Lysychansk. The Ukrainians are also pushing towards Bilohorivka and Lysychansk. They have established fire control over Lysychansk, so they can hit the Russians from here. And there's also unconfirmed reports that the Ukrainians are also potentially in the next few days will take control of the city called Ploshanka. And this will mean that they will essentially cut off the P66 highway and the potential supply of Russian trucks and other supplies on this highway, which is really, really important. And this is also a crucial road that feeds into Kreminna and Severodonetsk. So that's going to make life very difficult for the Russians below Ploshanka, which is around here, and north of Ploshanka, around Svatove. So overall, some good news. Things are not easy because, again, the Russians are pushing their mobilized soldiers on this front line. They're also now transferring some of their best troops from Kherson in Luhansk and potentially as well on the front line of Bakhmut, where they're also trying to continue pushing. I repeat myself multiple times here, but the Russians since June have been really trying to take Bakhmut. They've had some mediocre successes and they've lost a lot of men on all of this front for very little. It made more sense back in June to go through this road and take Bakhmut, but now that the northern front has collapsed for the Russians in Kharkiv and Luhansk, I think that it's negligible. If even if they get to Bakhmut, it will not be that big of a deal or disastrous for the Ukrainian forces. So for now, things are going to be quite quiet, I believe, in Kherson for the next few weeks. I think the Ukrainian army is rearming itself, repositioning their forces, trying to create a plan of attack. So we'll probably see some more movements probably by the end of the year, or if not in January 23. So we'll see. Now, today there was a report that the Ukrainian forces also striked on a Russian port located in close to Crimea, in a city called Novorossiysk, where the Russian army also has a naval base and a port. And apparently USV, an unmanned surface vessel, was used, a drone vessel, was used by the Ukrainian forces to attack. Now, the reports, and there's a video as well that came out, so I'll show you that. I'll show you guys that video, but it seems to not have been a very, or had any effect. The explosions seemed quite minimal. But the psychological blow it had on the Russians is pretty massive because Novorossiysk is, as I've mentioned, is also an oil, is a naval base, but also has an oil terminal. So I think maybe the Ukrainian army was trying to strike the oil terminal, making life more difficult for the Russians to supply their forces with, petrol and all that. And it's located about 675 kilometers from Odessa, which is a quite safe distance. At least the Russians thought that was a safe distance, but it's still, the drone still managed to get there and explode. So I'll show you the video a little bit later, but of course, Kremlin denied anything happened there, as usual. But again, it's a huge psychological blow for the Russians that essentially the ones that are living closer to the Ukrainian borders definitely do not feel safe knowing that, especially these drones can get so far into Russia. In other news, and this is unconfirmed, so you can take this with a grain of salt, but it's still interesting nonetheless if true. So the Russians obviously now they're attacking almost daily with their cruise missiles, but it was reported that today or yesterday Russia attacked with a missile that had a simulated nuclear warhead. And Russia used the Kh-55 missile, which is usually a missile used with nuclear payload, and they removed the nuclear warhead from it and replaced it with a dummy. So if true, this is significant because this means that Russia's potentially running out of normal rockets, and now they need to use more expensive nuclear rockets or rockets that are meant for nuclear strikes to conduct their strikes over Ukraine. Now, this is also significant in the sense that this can be very dangerous, and Russia is playing with fire. There are fail safes, even if somebody messes up and they somehow manage to launch a nuclear warhead. It's not just going to detonate like that. There needs to be, there's multiple fail safes that prevent that from happening. But even if it strikes with a nuclear warhead, there's still a lot of radioactive debris that can cause a lot of damage and environmental damage to the surrounding environment. So it's very concerning. And the fact that Russia, if true, is doing that really shows that they are potentially running out of normal rockets. And now they're starting to use some of their more expensive ones. So, last thing is today, the Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal said that 50% of Ukraine's energy system is out of order, so is damaged, and that really shows you the impact all these strikes are having over Ukraine and the importance of having more aid from the West to help Ukraine protect its skies. I mean, it's from day one. Zelensky and all the ministers have been asking all the partners to provide them with everything they could, and the Ukrainian forces always get very minimal amounts. But the Ukrainian people obviously are going to fight this until the very end. But it's very difficult when the partners are giving so little sometimes. And of course, I believe the Ukrainians are very grateful for all that, but the entire world needs to understand that they need to do everything they can to stop Russia and to arm Ukraine to the teeth, because 50% is a huge blow to any country. Imagine if the United States or Canada had 50% of its energy system knocked down. A lot of people would be incapable of doing normal things, and Ukrainians have been doing that for the last few months. And, I think now more than ever, global assistance needs to be at 110% and not at the 50% that is right now. I think they haven't maximized the amount of help that Ukraine should be getting, because Ukraine is not only defending its democracy, but it's also defending Europe and the entire world from this Russian evil that is not going to stop if they get to Ukraine. And they're going to continue pushing, and they've already mentioned that they're planning to take Poland and the Baltic states and the Balkans. At this point, we can, take this with a grain of salt, of course, but Russia has imperialistic ambitions that do not stop at Ukraine only. Let's not forget that. So, in terms of the videos, this is also, I wanted to show you what the cost of freedom is. Obviously, Ukrainians, there are deaths among Ukrainian army, and this is the price. And as you can see, these are all, this is just one grave of potentially thousands of Ukrainians that lay down their lives, men and women, for Ukrainian freedom. And it just breaks my heart. Yesterday I got very emotional watching this video, because that's the cost. Some people were ready to give their lives to see a future that was without evil in their country, a future that had democracy, that had opportunities for the people. And all these people are heroes, the one that laid down their lives. And it just breaks my heart to see all these graves, for the Ukrainians that have perished in the last few months. And all the civilians, the soldiers, the medics, everybody gave a massive sacrifice for this. And so I think that the entire world needs to see that and stop complaining that Ukraine should make peace arrangements with Russia, because the Ukrainian people went too far into it. They've lost so much to just give up at this point. This is the strike, apparently the strike that happened in Novorossiysk today with the unmanned surface vessel that Ukrainians used. Again, let's see. So you can see that, to be quite honest, I don't see the effects being really that big. The explosions seem to be quite small, to be quite honest. If we look again, it's sort of like an explosion in the middle. So I don't think anything really happened, but it still indicates that the Ukrainians are capable of going really far and deep into Russian territory. If we take a look where Novorossiysk is, it's right below the Crimean Peninsula. It's right here. So also very close to Putin's billion-dollar mansion in Sochi. So he's not going to go there anymore. I can bet you that. You can bet that. So it's a very important port for the Russians. I believe that they had a lot of their ships here before. They have some of their ships here. And the fact is that the Ukrainians probably sent one of their drones from Odessa all the way up to Novorossiysk. So it's very, very deep. And that's great. It's great to see that the range is really, really high for these drones. So hopefully they'll do more damage in the next few months as well. So this video is how the Russian camps are set up. This is in Russia, and apparently it's in Voronezh, somewhere in Russia. So let's take a look how the Russians live right now in their training camps. Let me put some of the audio. And keep in mind, guys, that these camps are in Russia. So this is not even the front lines, and this is the conditions that the Russians live in right now. Apparently, in this video, it was commented that this was in minus 7-degree weather, not factoring probably the wind chill. So these soldiers are probably already, starving and freezing to death. You can see their conditions, their living conditions. They have some very poor tents. They've even established some tarp tents, and they're just bunching up like penguins, trying to heat each other up. I just don't understand how they can accept these types of conditions. But then again, I think probably they saw worse in their communities. But yeah, I don't expect the Russians to do any sort of effect this winter. If anything, they're going to be struggling, especially with the cold. And now there's the first snowfall all over Ukraine, so it's going to get cold for the Russians, 100%. And yeah, I mean, I just don't understand what they're doing here. Like, is it training? Is it what is the purpose of this camp right now? Are they just being told to walk all the way up to Ukraine? I don't know. But it's probably some training that they're doing before they're being sent out to the front lines. But they use, isn't that like plastic, like tarp that you use for boxes? I think that's what it is. Like, this is how bad it is that they have to use like that, like plastic tarp to set up tents. Like, it's terrible. And last video, guys, is a Russian convoy, and it's probably a logistical convoy that was destroyed by the Ukrainian forces somewhere in Donbass. So let's take a look. And these are probably all KAMAZ trucks. You can see that this is probably like a fueling or probably kitchen little truck transporting food. Yeah, these are all KAMAZ trucks. So the Ukrainians are continuing on with their strategy of hitting the logistical supplies of the Russian army. Again, I think I counted 7 trucks here, potentially 6. It's a huge supply chain of trucks, so they probably were carrying a lot of ammunition, probably food, petrol, fuel, other type of first aid kits potentially. So that's a huge blow for any soldiers that were waiting for those supplies to come in to support them. So again, it's a really good initiative by the Ukrainian army, and that's really going to stop the Russians, especially with the winter that is now approaching, and if not, is already there. So it's going to be bad news for the Russians for the next couple months. So that's it, guys. Thank you for watching my video. I really appreciate your support. Again, if you guys are wondering who this guy is that I've put today, this is Bogdan Khmelnytsky, and he's a very, very important Ukrainian hetman, leader of the Cossacks in the mid 17th century. And the reason why I put him is because he's one of the most influential figures in Ukrainian history. He single-handedly restored Ukraine's independence in the mid 17th century from the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth through his uprising against the Polish. And I think he is one of the most influential people in Ukraine because he restored the Ukrainian identity, which was quickly dissolving at that point. So I put him up here, and every week I'll be changing. And let me know if you're interested in hearing a little bit more about Bogdan Khmelnytsky in terms of the history and why he's such an important figure. Potentially, I could create a mini series of a couple minutes discussing important Ukrainian leaders and people. Let me know. So again, thank you for watching the video. Really appreciate your support. Please subscribe to my channel, leave me a comment, and like the video if you like the video. Thank you, and take care, guys.